Hello everyone and welcome to SuttonsDaze and to this week's canning chat. Remember, if you have a canning question, throw it in the comment section below and I'll answer it next week. If it is a pressing need an immediate answer, toss it to my email. I'm going to remember to check my spam folder and I'll try to answer you as soon as possible, okay? But this week we have 4.5 pages of questions. There's tons of them. So we're going to get started and jump in on this right away. Frankie Odom asked, how high is it safe to stack jars filled with food sitting in their cardboard boxes? My rule of thumb is too high. That's just my rule of thumb. I think any more than that, you're getting kind of risky, you know? But I know that some people have said 3 high, and I'm sure somebody will comment on this and say, I've done 3 high all the time. I do too. You have to make a decision on what is best for you, okay? Beth Muscat, I've been canning up ugly chicken for a bit and finally tasted it. Yay, she said it was really good. Super yummy, amazingly tender and flavorful. My stove oven is on the fritz, so I decided to can up some mild Italian sausages raw packed. I know you said you don't like the sausage patties canned up, but I got to thinking about breakfast sausages, link kind. Could I leave them in the casings raw and add water to the jar, or should that be another one of those meats that should be par cooked? Legitimately, I think it's one of those meats that shouldn't be canned, okay? It's not approved with the casings, number one, but it's, you know, it's not approved. How's that for the simple one? And because the texture is going to be way off, okay? If you were to do it, I would cook them, but it's not an approved thing, so you do so at your own risk. And you know, understand why. I mean, they have not tested it basically, and they cannot guarantee that the heat necessary for the time necessary reaches the center of those meats to kill off any bacteria, you know. So I wouldn't do it. I think you'll be disappointed. Diamond Gardner says, ooh, insert Arnold Horshack's voice. Okay, I love that we're from the same era, okay? I have a question that I have every canning session. Let's say I'm making salsa and I want to add more or less jalapeno peppers or some more or less garlic. Can I do that? And it always seems too watery. Can I strain the vegetables and then jar the salsa? It makes more juice when it's canned anyway. Okay, so the peppers, you know, they say don't alter the recipe because they've based it on the acidity level because it is water bath canned, you know. So by adding more peppers, you change that acidity level, and they don't have an approved method for that. As far as the garlic, I mean, I don't think that would throw it off really. But as far as for straining it, right, there's no approved method for it. I'll leave it at that. Debbie Sims, I have a question. I am into making jam right now, so I'm watching all of your jam videos. Thank you. I have noticed that when you make jam, sometimes you put the pectin in first with the fruit, sometimes you put the sugar in first with the fruit, sometimes you mix the pectin and the sugar together and add it with the fruit. I usually add pectin first, and then after the first rolling boil, add the sugar, and then let it rolling boil for 1 minute. Am I doing something wrong here? Not necessarily. When I am showing you recipes that I'm doing, I'm basing it off of recipes that I have garnered elsewhere, okay? So, no. You know, I'm just doing it the way that I was shown how to do a recipe like that or similar to that. Now, when you get into the Pomona pectin aspect of it, they have a specific sequence that they do, and so that is the sequence that I think you should do if you're using that kind of pectin. Otherwise, go with the recipe that you're basing it off of, okay? Michelle B, question on freezing garden harvest for canning later. I blanch green beans and freeze as I harvest. Wondering if these would be too mushy if I canned, or if raw frozen green beans would be better. Whole raw tomatoes and jalapenos in the freezer. Could I add salsa, or does freezing change the texture? Can you add it to salsa? I'm thinking you're saying. So as far as green beans go, I don't blanch them if I'm going to can them. So, you know, that's that. But as far as the tomatoes and the jalapenos, they will be super mushy. They will be super mushy. So I think it will change the texture, but I also know people that do it as they, wait to get enough. So it's a matter of how particular you are about the texture of your salsa. Melanie Scoggins. Lisa, do you have any experience with using the canning lids from Lehman's Superb Lids? I had to go do some digging on this one, and I think that auto-corrected from reusable lids to Superb lids. I did not know that Lehman's had reusable lids. I do now. So I'm thinking they're pretty much the same exact thing as Tatler or Harvest Guard. I have no experience with them because I didn't know they existed. Okay, Henry Cooks. Question. I have seen a lot of recipes for jams lately where the demonstrator is adding jalapeno peppers. I was taught by someone who was a master canner that you cannot do this. She did, however, help me write 2 recipes where this would be allowed by adding cider vinegar. She tested them and found them safe. I'd be interested how she tested them, truthfully. Only allowing 3 small jalapenos. She said it would be okay to leave the seeds to make it hotter. One I saw recently only used the juice of 1 lime, 8 cups of cranberries, 2+ cups of water, and 2 cups of sugar, 6 large jalapenos. She canned it. Then she recanned it, adding 3 more whole jalapenos and no acid except for the original fresh lime juice. What is your opinion of adding such a low acid pepper to jams and jellies? To me, it sounds like asking for trouble. My friend is no longer with us, so I defer to you. Okay, gotcha. So I'm sorry about your friend, but peppers are, low acid. There is a recipe for pepper jam, I believe, on the National Center for Home Food Preservation, but as far as adding it to jams and jellies, it's not necessarily an approved method, okay? They do have some recipes up there that are tested and approved. If you want to add the extra acidity, then I think you'd be good. I have no opinion because I'm guilty of doing it. Seriously. I know that these things are, they're heated all the way through. I know that they are brought up to the right temp. I know that they're canned for the right time. Obviously they're jams, so I don't pressure can them. And to date, I've had no issues. However, that is not an excuse, and I hate it when people give me that excuse. I've always done it, so it's good. No, not necessarily. It's not an approved method, so it's something that you have to decide if you want to do for yourself. If you want to avoid all of that, blah, 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 okay, what you can do is dehydrate those peppers, grind them into a powder, and very carefully add that powder to your jams and jellies. Now, another way to do this, obviously, and I think it was mentioned in here, is to add red pepper flakes. That adds the heat too, and is perfectly safe. So if you add that dry ingredient, you're fine. But there is concern, and I know the Department of Agriculture here in Michigan does not allow people at the farmer's market to sell pepper jams because they're technically not approved. So, weigh your options there, make a decision, your kitchen, your rules, right? Natalie Wyant says, thank you so much for doing these chats. My question is, I have always thought you were only supposed to use salt in canning that is specifically for canning or pickling. I see videos where others are using things such as sea salt or Himalayan salt. Are these salts also safe and recommended for canning? The issue is you don't want to use table salt that has iodine in it because that'll make things cloudy. It doesn't look good, So yes, the Himalayan, I actually was just looking at that. The Himalayan salt and the sea salt are fine for canning. They are. And, that's only if you want it in there. Now for pickling it's needed, but for just regular canning, it's strictly for taste. It has nothing to do with preservation. CC December 2018. Can you pressure can hot dogs, hot links, Kebasa, sausage links? If so, do you pre-cook? None of that is approved, and I highly recommend not doing it because you're not going to like them. They come out wrong. The texture's totally wrong. Really wrong. Okay. So, no, they're not approved. If you were going to do it, I guess you could pre-cook them, but you're not going to be happy. Especially, well, pretty much all of it. You're not going to be happy. They're pretty nasty. Same CC December 2018 says, what happens to the meat if your meat after processing is above the water broth line? Will it dry out or spoil? No. Okay, great question. when you are raw packing, what you are doing is you're putting raw meat into the jar and it's cooking down while you're pressure canning it. So any of the liquid in the jar is the natural juice from the meat. It is not meant to cover everything in the jar. If it does, bonus. If it doesn't, it doesn't matter. Over time, what you may notice is that in the jar, there's a little bit of discoloration just because it's sitting above the liquid, right? But when you open that jar and dump that into a pan, I bet you can't find it because I never have been able to. So it's just a matter of sitting up there, no air, no liquid, no nothing. Perfectly safe, perfectly good if you canned it properly, okay? Trina Pyron, this may be a silly question, there is no such thing, but approximately how long does it take a Presto pressure canner to come to pressure when hot packing? That is 100% dependent on the personality of your canner, the personality of your stove, how hot the water in the jars are. I mean, there's so many factors in there. So what you might want to do is just kind of gauge, you know, do a few of your own and kind of pay attention to how long it takes. I've never clocked it, truth be told. So there is no standard per se, because every single situation is different. Great question. Jubilee says, what got you into canning? Did you do it when your kids were young? No, because I never had children. This is my stepson and our step grandchildren, you know, well, they're my grandkids, just leave me alone. But I never had kids. So I did not start canning until I was in my 40s. But it is something that I fell in love with. I always wanted to do. And I felt a calling to do it. I don't know how else to explain it, to make sure that we were, prepared and safe and that we had what we needed. It was kind of like a calling. Okay. So, that's what got me into it. I love it. I am fascinated with it. I truly enjoy every single minute that I do it and that I talk about it and that I show you guys. Canning is a big, big part of my life around here. So, yeah, I just love it. Lemon Crinkles. I can't remember. Have you ever discussed the need or not to sterilize your jars when pressure canning? Wouldn't the process accomplish that? Excellent question, Steph. The rule of thumb, I think, for a lot of people, make sure that when you're pressure canning, only when you're pressure canning, okay? Make sure the jars are clean. Do they need to be sterilized? No, because they are going to get sterilized during the pressure canning process. Now, when you're water bathing, those babies need to be sterilized. They're very important, okay? So, because they're not going to get hot enough during the water bath process to do that for you. So, no, you don't have to if you're pressure canning. Great question. And not one that I think we've had before. Rachel E. says, I have the All-American canner. The little valve that the steam escapes from seems to be unscrewed and water comes out through a bit, but I can't get it to tighten anymore. The last time I canned, I opened the canner and found I only had 1 inch of water left. Is that okay? Yes. I don't know what it was you were canning where you only had the 1 inch of water. It would be an issue if you ran completely out of water, okay? So are you running it too high? Are you, that would be my thing, is if you are running it too high and you're canning meat, okay, then you run a very significant risk of running the canner dry, which will ruin it quite seriously. But the 1 inch of water is still actually a good amount of water, so you're good. And as far as the steam escaping and a little bit and water comes through a bit, that's normal and fine, so you're good there. So yeah, just make sure you've got your 3 inches of water or whatever in there, and you're good to go. Make sure you don't have the heat on too high. Matthew Souther, my question is around pickles. Okay. My cucumber plants have been overachievers this year, and I've canned over 30 pints of pickles so far. Most all jars have sealed, but I have one every now and then that doesn't. Is it safe to reprocess the jars that don't seal? Matthew, you run a very strong risk of them being mushy, okay? So you might be better off taking that one off and putting it in the fridge and making sure that you eat your pickles, Reprocessing them is not going to be an added benefit. It's not. Kathleen Elliott says, what is the ratio of dried apricots to fresh apricots? I can't find dried apricot jelly recipes. Okay, so the ratio is 6 ounces of dried apricots, or roughly 170 grams, is equivalent to 1 cup of fresh apricots. A cup of dried apricots provides the same nutrients as 2 cups of cooked apricots. So the issue you would run into, okay, is that you need to add liquid, because when you're making jam, there's a liquid aspect to this. So that I don't have an answer for right now. But if you're going to use a dried fruit like that, you definitely will need to add a liquid to it. So something to take a look at. I want to say I've seen recipes out there that use dried apricots, but it may not be the main fruit. It may be the secondary fruit, you know. So I would keep looking, keep searching, and good luck. Country Girl, okay. The broth from ugly chicken, pork, or beef, can it be saved and frozen until there's enough to can as broth? Sure, sure. I don't know that I would well, I don't know. Would I call it broth? Sure, I would. It's not bone broth, you know, but it's broth. It's the natural juices from the meat. So there shouldn't be an issue with that. Go for it. Kimberly Haney says, I look forward to these canning chats. Me too. I love them. I have a question though. After a miscommunication with hubby, we ended up with about 30 pounds of stew meat from the last quarter of a steer we bought. So I canned it. I had two jars not seal after 12 hours. I put them in the fridge to use for dinner the next day. When I went to open them, one had sealed. Could that one have gone to the shelf instead? No. That is a false seal. It's not the seal that you need in order to leave it on the shelf. Okay, that occurred because of the difference in temperature when it was put into the cold refrigerator. So no, you don't want to do that. When you put it in the fridge, call it good, eat it. Okay. Susie M. I canned too many whole tomatoes last year. I was wondering if I can add them to my fresh tomatoes I will be processing this year for tomato sauce. Yep, you sure can. Dagny Taggart. Thoughts on running mixed canner loads of quarts and pints if the time of the items is the same or very close, or run the long time. Run the long time. So if I am canning ground beef and I have pints and quarts, right? I'm going to run all of them together in the same canner to save time. I'm going to run all of them for the quart time because that is the higher time. So that's what you want to do. I would be careful because you don't specify what it is, but I would be careful with some vegetables because if you can them for much longer, they might get a little, softer. But yeah, you can do it. Sure. Pam Sanders says, question for you. I recently canned corned beef, left the jars set probably about 30 hours before I got around to cleaning them and taking off the rims. 2 of them had like a bubble come up from the bottom, kind of like they burped. The lids were sealed good though, so hoping they're okay. Never had that happen before. So I wanted to check. Okay, so yes, this is absolutely normal. When you're washing your jars, I mean, theoretically, you're moving the jar around, right? And the water is warm. So if they sat for that long, the jar's cooled off to room temperature, whatever that may be. The water may have been warmer, so that would have, the temperature of the water that it was sitting in while you were washing it would have heated up per se, not a lot, just a little, anything in the jar. And so when you move it like that, it doesn't burp, but it creates kind of like a lava lamp, right? Absolutely normal. Absolutely normal. Don't panic from it. You're perfectly fine. If they're sealed, they're good. Great question. Lucy Thomas says, when doing jams or jellies, can you cut back on sugar? And can you change an approved canning recipe just a little? Okay, so the second question is your kitchen, your rules. Okay. As far as the jams and jellies, if you want to cut back on your sugar, I highly recommend Pomona's pectin. I'll put a link down below because that allows you to use significantly less sugar, and it's very easy to follow. They're absolutely fantastic. So yes, and your kitchen, your rules. Okay. Theoretically, though, you're not supposed to change an approved recipe because it's been tested for exactly what they're giving you. Okay. Jackie Little. If I roast my tomatoes, onions, and peppers to make salsa and I pressure can it, do I have to add citric acid to it? Absolutely. Absolutely. They have found that it requires citric acid, whether you're water bath canning or pressure canning. I must have it. Must have it. Okay. Christine Enzor. Second time. Sorry. She has 2 questions. Can chicken breast be canned whole or must it be reduced in size? Needs to fit in the jar. Okay. So if you can get it to fit in the jar, you're good. If a recipe says 3 cups celery and you don't eat celery, can you just leave it out, or must it be replaced with 3 cups of something? You can leave it out. Just leave it out. Not a problem. If I don't know what the recipe is, so I'm without more information. I'm kind of flying blind here. But if it's a soup, it's not a problem. Take out the celery if you don't like it or are allergic to it. Take out the onions if you don't like it or are allergic to it. That's not an issue, because it really shouldn't take up that much more room, and you'll probably make it up with the liquid. But it might produce 4.5 pints instead of 5. Do you know what I mean? Depending on what you're making. Tina Harvey says, can you add balsamic vinegar to your spaghetti sauce when you're canning it and add the lemon juice too, or can you omit the lemon juice because of the balsamic vinegar acid base? To the best of my knowledge, balsamic vinegar is not a 5% acidity vinegar. So you still need the lemon juice, okay? Hope that answered your question. Sally Malmberg, I think this is a question that has not been asked. Whenever I have a pint or a quart that doesn't seal, I freeze the jar with the food in it. Is this harmful to the jars? It could be, because the jar could explode when the stuff inside of it expands, So it is kind of best to take it out of the jar. Jesse Dutton, are the generic canning lids staying sealed? They absolutely are. I go in there and I check them and I move them, and not a problem. Every single one has stayed sealed. Life is Good says, I raw packed pink eye peas in hot jars, kept 1-inch headspace in boiling water, and pressure canned them. A few jars turned out great and a few jars siphoned. The ones that had lost water are now about 1 inch of beans not submerged. Are they still safe? All sealed perfectly. Okay, so the deal is that you raw pack the beans. You did not boil them first. So different beans absorb different amounts of water. And this is not an approved method. Okay, that being said. So what they did is they soaked up that water. They soaked up the water and they continued soaking it up while they cooled down. Are they safe? Theoretically, even though it's not approved, it's not approved. Okay, so, theoretically, okay, but I'm not giving a guarantee there because it's not an approved method of canning. James Brown, hello, my friend. The question I have, when you are canning green beans, do they always have to be pressure canned? My mom is trying to tell me I can water bath them and they would be fine, because all the ones she ever did never sealed, and she thinks it's her lids. Okay, so you cannot water bath green beans. Now, I know that great-grandma, mom, whoever, used to do it, and that's the way they always did it, and that's great. They also used to do a whole lot of other things that we've proven are not cool, okay? Today, with the food that we have, with the science that we have, the only safe way to preserve green beans by canning them is to pressure can them. So, pressure can away. G-Man says, do you make green tomato chow and mustard pickles, or is that just an Atlantic Canadian thing? I don't make them. I've never heard of them, but that doesn't mean anything, and I have no idea if it's a regional thing. So if anybody else has heard of green tomato chow and mustard pickles, please drop a comment down below. Let's let G-Man, he's not alone, okay? The final question, dun, 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 dun. Daydream Believer says, I'm having a siphoning nightmare. I think I remember seeing this. My jars are new. My jars are new. My lids are being heated again because I thought cold lids might not be working well. I bought a jiggler and love it, but still siphoning. I'm crying and frustrated. Okay. Take a deep breath. This is not the end of the world, okay? Siphoning happens. It's not the end of the world. If your jar's sealed, you're going to be fine, okay? Siphoning happens. There's a t-shirt in the store down below that says that. So let me tell you a little bit about siphoning. And I'm going to read here because it's a lot, okay? Siphoning is when liquid is drawn out of the jar by a rapid change in temperature and air pressure. It seems to occur more frequently in canning fruits and applesauces and peaches, that kind of thing, but I know it happens with meat and vegetables and all of that too. So here are some reasons why it might be siphoning, okay? Number one, make sure that the jar and the liquid is as hot as it can be when filling. It's a good habit to get into if you're hot packing things, okay? So you want to make sure that they are nice and hot and the water that they're going into is nice and hot. Remember that any fluctuation while you're canning, if it goes to 11 and then 15 and then 10 and then 14 and 11 and 15, that's really bad, okay? So any fluctuation like that is an issue. If you are not letting the canner rest for at least 5 to 10 minutes after it is completely depressurized on its own and you open that lid, then that could cause a severe change in temperature, and that would also have an issue and cause siphoning, okay? There's a multitude of reasons for siphoning. So I don't know what's happening with, with you and where you are and what you're doing, but those are just some of them. Don't move the canner. Oh my goodness. I mean, there's so many reasons for siphoning. So take a deep breath. If your jars are sealing, you got this. You got this. You really do. Okay. So you'll get the hang of it. You'll find out exactly what it is that's causing it. Go back over this and see, are you opening it too soon? Is your heat fluctuating? Are you moving the canner? Anything like that. Maybe you're starting it off too hot. Okay. So maybe you're starting the canner off too hot. And so it goes from being pretty, temperate, at room temperature or whatever. And then you've got the heat on high and it builds up too hot. I have a heat too fast. That could be it too. Okay. So I hope that helps. Take a deep breath. You got this. Remember, if you like what we do here, please hit that like, subscribe, and share. Throw your questions in the comment section below. I would love to answer them next week in the canning chat. Until next time, everybody, be safe.